So now I'm going to hand things over to our presenters today of using focus groups for organizational insights. We have Kristen Bauman, as Partner Engagement Coordinator for CQL, as well as Elizabeth Seitz, our Director of Organizational Excellence. Kristen, Elizabeth, it's all yours.
Thank you, Seth. So as Seth said, welcome to today's webinar. We get to talk about focus groups, one of CQL's most favorite activities to do, especially during accreditation work. As Seth said, I'm Elizabeth Seitz. I am here with Kristen Bowman, my amazing partner in crime today. She is CQL's Partner Engagement Coordinator. So let's get going. So we always like to start by sharing CQL's vision and mission. Our vision is a world of dignity, opportunity, and community for all people. And our mission speaks to CQL's dedication to the definition, measurement, and improvement of personal quality of life. Now, currently, CQL partners with almost 500 organizations with some type of accreditation. And this includes organizations in 25 states in the U.S., as well as valued partners in Canada and Ireland. There are many benefits to a partnership with CQL. Most importantly is its positive impact on people with disabilities and on the workforce, those that support them. CQL accreditation also provides accountability for progress, improved services, resource sharing, and external validation of the good work that is being done by providers. So, let's get started talking about this fun topic today, and we always like to start with the why. So let's understand why the use of focus groups can be so important and valuable to an organization. Okay. So the use of focus groups within an organization is most importantly done for one main reason: to gather information. Okay? Which can then be used to enact change or for quality improvement. Okay? Another reason is really to learn from a diverse group of people to get a holistic look at an organization. Now, on their own, leaders only know their perspective, which, sometimes isn't always reflective of everything that is going on in an organization. So by having a variety of people you can get feedback from, you can learn holistically what is going on through an organization. Okay. Another why is to gauge satisfaction and engagement. Okay. This helps to understand the culture that truly exists within an organization. Let me give you an example. If people do not want to participate in a focus group or are hesitant to share information, is it because that they're, simply too busy? They're working a second job, they have families, those things in life that, create busyness for all of us. Or is it indicative of deeper organizational cultural issues, such as potentially a fear of retaliation for sharing their honest opinions? Okay. Another why is it helps us match system and practice to see where gaps may exist. Now, sometimes systems, policies, procedures, new forms, documents, ways of doing things are implemented in an organization, but there's no follow-up to understand if that system is actually working in practice. Okay? This is where we start to see potential gaps. Now, the use of focus groups can help leaders understand if something is working or not and what might need to change. The ideas of appreciative inquiry can also be used here. Is a system working well in a service or area but not another? Focus groups can help you potentially understand the why that is happening. Okay. Here's one example that we tend to see. It has to do with staff recognition. Sometimes we talk to organizational leaders and they list ways that they recognize their staff and things that they do to show that their staff are valued. But when we talk with staff in focus groups, staff don't see those things as valued items or valued recognition. So there becomes a gap in what one group of people is saying versus what another group of people are saying when it comes to feeling valued and recognition. Another example that sometimes we see is marketing efforts. If you're doing a focus group with, say, community members, what you might find out is that there are lots of people within the community that are still not aware of the organization or the work that it does. So there are gaps maybe in marketing efforts or getting the word out about the organization. Another why for focus groups is it helps to understand the strength of the organization through the eyes of others. It's not just about the opportunities or gaps, but it's also about the strengths of the organization. Okay? This goes back to seeing it from the perspective of others. But focus groups, again, are not just meant to focus on areas of opportunity, but to celebrate what is going well and what other people think the organization is really good at. And lastly, and I think most importantly, is focus groups help to show people that their opinion really matters. When we use focus groups reliably and consistently, focus groups can show people that their opinion truly matters, especially when that feedback is used and when it's shown how it's connected back to what was learned. For example, when a change is made, an organization can send an email or newsletter blast out that says very specifically, based on your feedback, we are implementing XYZ. And that shows the closing of the loop. That shows that the follow-up has occurred and that people's opinions are being respected and that they're valued. Lastly, of course, it just provides a continuous feedback system. And that's really what focus groups should be about. It should be a way for all stakeholders to provide information and to provide their input into the life of the organization. Now, there are lots of different types of focus groups that can occur. So we're going to talk about some of those different types that an organization could facilitate. These are simply examples and not indicative of all the different types that could be held. First and most importantly, starting with people that are receiving services. Now, this is, mainly for, teens or adults that are receiving services. And if you support children, a lot of times it might be the family members that join with the child or join to speak for the child. And of course, that depends on age of the child. Okay. It depends on the different types of services too. If you look at early intervention type services, it's the child and the family that are receiving that service. So it's good to understand the perspective and the views of the organization from the family member. Another type of focus group that we, of course, at CQL are often facilitating are focus groups with direct support staff or your frontline staff. And of course, this looks different depending on what type of services that you provide. This could be a direct support professional. It could be a key worker. It could be a job coach or employment specialist. If you're a case management only organization, it could be your case managers. If you provide early intervention services, it would be your early intervention specialist or your developmental therapist. But in the end, this is the group of employees that provide the direct support or service to the person getting that support. Next are frontline supervisors. And this is one of my personal favorite, focus groups because this is a group of people that have one of the toughest jobs in any organization. This is the group of people who directly supervise those frontline staff. Okay? And depending on the size of the organization, this group of staff may or may not exist or may only be a couple of people. If you only support as an organization 10 people, you may not have a line of direct supervisors. But if you support 500, you probably do have a line within your organizational chart of frontline supervisors. It might be a house manager, it just might be a direct supervisor, it might be a lead coach, whatever the terminology used in your organization, it's your first line of supervisory staff. And I'm using air quotes when I say this, but it is not the boss's boss. It is the direct line supervisor. Another type of focus group are with family members of people receiving services. Now, this is not just guardians, it's not just conservators, but involved family members of the child or the adult that receives the services. Yeah. One of my favorite stories actually involving focus groups with family members was two focus groups I was able to facilitate probably about 7 years ago now. And I did them back to back. One was a focus group of family members of children receiving services, and one was a focus group with family members of adults receiving services. And we asked the exact same questions of both groups. And what was interesting is when we asked the family members of adults receiving services what they hope for their loved one in the future, everybody said that they wanted their loved one to be safe and healthy and happy. Okay, very broad ideas. When we asked the same question of the family members of children receiving services, they had wildly different answers. And their answers included, I want my child to graduate. I want them to move out of the house. I want them to find a job that they enjoy. I want them to find someone that makes them happy if that's what they want. I want them to be able to dream and have different goals and go to college if they want to. And so it was really interesting seeing the differences in the expectations for loved ones from family members, depending on where their family member was at in receiving services. So you can learn some very interesting things from those focus groups. Another type of focus group would be community partners. And what's really interesting about speaking with community partners is what you can learn again. And community partners might include partner providers, state funding agency staff, external case managers. It might be people's employers. So the people that you support, if they are employed, they have jobs, it could be those employers. It could be banks that you have connection with or financial services. It could be local schools or other service organizations within a community, and not just disability service organizations. Other types of community partners could be, if you're involved with the Chamber of Commerce, it could be the physicians that the people that you support see, or that if you have agency nurses who they work with. Could be local churches that you have connections with, local government officials, or other vendors that you collaborate with as an organization. But with community partners, consider who the organization is connected to and has a relationship with in its community. You can learn a lot from, how the organization is viewed within its local community. Another type of focus group is innovative practices. This is one that we use when we are facilitating a PCE with distinction accreditation, but we find out some really interesting things. So it's not limited to who could learn from this, but this type of focus group could be anyone could attend. Anyone within the organization, within the local community, just to share unique perspectives on what is unique about this organization? And what are we doing that no one else or maybe few others are doing? This can also be used to discover potential opportunities for increased innovation, which could be the use of technology. It could be expanding into different service types. There are lots of things when it comes to innovation that it could be. So, by inviting people to come in and share their unique perspectives, you can learn a lot about potentially too what's going on in other places. You could invite other service providers in the area, or, if you have external case manager or care coordinator or managed care organizations that work with a lot of other different providers, you could potentially learn some of the great things that other providers are doing that you might be able to mimic as well. Another focus group type is advocacy. And again, that this can be made up of anybody, particularly people who are strong self-advocates, and anybody within the organization that's involved in local, state, or national advocacy efforts. This could be disability-specific advocacy, but it could also be social advocacy that's important to people. And a great thing about this type of focus group is you can really learn about current efforts and areas of opportunity. What are those social advocacy causes that are important to people that you can help people get involved with, or as an organization that you might want to support? In addition, organizations might hold focus groups on very specific topic areas such as rights. There might be specific topic areas such as housing or employment services for people. You could hold a focus group specifically learning about training and education and where people want to know more about what topics are missing. You could do one specifically on employee recognition. What are we doing well? What are we not doing well? What are some other ideas that we can implement across an organization? What things are we maybe seeing that are different generationally? Are we seeing a difference in what different people across different generations consider important with recognition? And then potentially also one specifically around person-centered planning. What are the good things that are happening out there? What are ways that we can get better? How could we use this as a brainstorming focus group where we can learn and talk about what's going on and where we can move forward? Additionally, if you're an organization that's getting ready to go through accreditation, consider how to use feedback sessions in the preparation process. So you might hold focus groups specific to the different basic assurances while you're completing your basic assurances self-assessment. You could also use it to gather success stories that could be shared during the accreditation. And that's something that CQL absolutely love, is hearing all the great things that have been going on within an organization. So next we want to talk about how providers can maximize and engage stakeholders when it comes to focus groups. So how can we get people reeled in and how can we keep them excited about this? So like we did, okay, we started this webinar by sharing the why. Why would you want to hold a focus group? Okay? So you have to share the why with those that you are inviting. Okay? Be clear and honest about the reason for the group. What is the goal of holding the group? Why are we doing this? Is it for, say, an accreditation? Is it just for general feedback? Is it a way of checking in with people? Or is it as a response to something and you want to know more? Okay. It can also help people understand why they were chosen as an individual and as a group. So let people know, why were you chosen? Okay. For example, if a family member is trying to understand, oh, well, why would you invite me? It might be because of their lived experience of a family member of someone with a disability to understand a family perspective. Okay. So making sure that the people understand why they are being invited and included. Okay. sharing the why to their opinion being important. Is it because of their tenure within the organization? You want to know from someone who's been here for 20 years, but you also want to know from someone who's newer. What are the great things that are going on, and what things could be enhanced? Is it because they do have a unique perspective based on their position in the community or within the organization? One thing to remember is be ready as an organization. You have to be ready to be vulnerable here. Um, Sometimes it's simply we don't have all the answers and we really need your help. We really want to know what you think about something. Okay. So it's okay to be vulnerable. You don't have to have all the answers. And so sometimes it's just simply saying that we want your input because we don't have all the answers. And then lastly, relate it back to the reason why the group is being held. Okay, so your opinion is important because we're getting ready for accreditation and we want to know what's happening on the ground in the day program or what's happening with the employment specialist. So relate it back to the reason why you're holding the focus group to why their opinion is important. Another thing to always make sure that you do, and we see this so often, is people aren't given plenty of notice about the focus groups being held. So consider when and how people are being invited to participate. We would say give at least 4 to 6 weeks advance notice. Consider how people are invited to participate as well. Are you doing an open invite and people choose a day and time to attend? Okay. Are you sending specific invitations to specific people? How are you extending invitations? Are you doing it through email, through a written memo, through a communication system in your electronic health record system, through phone calls or text? Okay. So consider the best methods for extending invitations. And then consider follow-up invites, okay, or reminders, just again through email, text, or phone calls, just reminding people and of their invitation to attend and why it's really important that you wish that they attend. Um, Consider also too, especially for employees, will those employees be expected to come in during their time off? Or if they are working, will coverage be provided so that they can attend? These are absolutely questions that employees are going to ask. So be prepared with those answers. Lastly, provide expectations of the group. One of the first thing, and Kristen will definitely be talking about this here in a little while, is setting those ground rules from the beginning. So setting very clear ground rules at the beginning of the group, if not before, during the invitation. Okay. It's important to make sure people know that this is simply information gathering. It's not a session to air out personal grievances. It doesn't mean that that won't happen, but always make sure that this is well established, that people know it's information gathering. Okay? Other expectations should be, what is said in the group stays in the group. Okay? We want to make sure that people feel comfortable in expressing their thoughts and their perspectives. It's also important to maintain the expectation of everybody respects each other's opinion. That's just not from the facilitator, but also from the other people in the group. Allowing each person to talk is important. So setting the expectations for the group that we want to hear from everyone. Okay. And also, again, back to, just personal safety, reminding people that they don't have to answer a question if they aren't comfortable or don't want to. Other ways include, ensuring facilitation is really done by a neutral party. When it comes to who facilitates the groups, we would strongly recommend a neutral person is the one who facilitates the conversation. And perception of authority, not just authority, but perception of authority does matter, especially for employees. Okay? So we know that HR should be seen as a neutral party, but unfortunately, it may not always be the case for employees. It comes down to how trustworthy that staff is perceived as. A lot of times, it may be a good facilitator, may be someone who's in a quality or training role, someone who's out of that line of supervision, if you will. So, again, think about who has the actual authority and who might have perceived authority when determining who the best facilitator might be. The facilitator should be someone who has some skill in conflict resolution and can read the room, if you will, to know when to sidestep a question or get things moving along. Some other traits of a really strong focus group moderator would be someone with patience, right? Someone with foresight, like we said, able to anticipate where and how things could go, and someone who is able to build trust quickly with the group. Those are some of the things that we do when CQL facilitates focus groups. These are all things that we're keeping in mind as we're facilitating those groups. Right. We want to really ensure comfort. Um, Kristen's going to talk about being able to keep these sustainable, keep focus groups going, and she'll definitely talk about ensuring comfort. It is so important. We want to touch on it a couple times, but people have to feel that this focus group is not punitive. Now, again, we're specifically speaking to employee focus groups, but it also could be people that you support or family members. They can't feel, and we got to try to help them understand that this is not punitive. With ensuring comfort as well is ensuring confidentiality, and I think this is probably the biggest part of ensuring people's comfort. We have to ensure confidentiality of attendance and of the information that's learned. So, who attended is not going to be shared. A list of people in attendance will not be kept. And all information that is learned will be combined with no names attached to who said what. Now, if you're facilitating the group virtually, don't use any AI note-taking bots in the session or allow the session to be recorded. That will immediately create mistrust. If facilitating the group in person, ensure the physical space allows for privacy. No cameras. It should be held in a safe physical location. For example, a main office maybe where everyone can see who's coming and going may not make some people feel safe. So we want to ensure privacy. And people are much more likely to open up in spaces where they feel physically, mentally, and emotionally safe. Lastly, show appreciation. Thank you cannot be said enough. Okay. And as we know, beverages and snacks available if you're in person always, goes a long way as a thank you as well. In addition, individual follow-up thank yous are always nice. Just to kind of circle back, send a written thank you, send a text message, a phone call, just telling people thank you for your time. We appreciate it so much. So lastly, before I turn it over to Kristen, some things to additionally think about are really to pay or not to pay. This specifically is when you're talking about your own employees, and it should be clear if employees are getting paid for attending. So same goes for any other group of people invited to attend a focus group. Is this voluntary? Okay. Employees will ask specifically if they are being paid to attend or not. Definitely keep to the time frame advertised that it will be. Again, it'll create mistrust if you say it's only going to last an hour and then you keep going for 2 hours. So keep to the time frame that you said it was going to be, even if you haven't gone through all the questions. Stop when you have said that you will end. Okay. So with this, you will want to know, of course, what you can reasonably accomplish in the time frame allotted. Prioritize the questions as needed. And then lastly, ensure all voices are heard and the conversation's not dominated by one or a few people. This happens and it will happen. And it's just something that you can take into consideration as people are being invited to attend. And this is why we always say smaller groups are better because they will allow for more conversation from all participants. So we always try to stick to around 10 to 12 people. It depends on how the group is being facilitated, but definitely something to take into consideration as you're planning and scheduling your focus groups. So now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Kristen.
All right. Thank you all so much for listening so far. We're just going to keep on going. Again, if you have any questions, just feel free to put them in the Q&A box. But continuing on this conversation about focus groups, if we think about feedback in our lives, it tends to happen really fast, right? We have surveys, QR codes, you get a free drink if you give a review, all these different ways of things asking us for our opinions. Focus groups are a little bit different. This is a chance for people to take pause in consideration. There's some old school kind of face-to-face conversations. And for this reason, focus groups are extremely effective. It's a great way to get that important information in a really personal and a thoughtful way. So there's so many benefits for doing focus groups. But specifically thinking about, what do you want to learn? What's the purpose of the focus group? You may want to limit it to a certain subject. But consider limiting questions to specific subjects, or to start with areas that you want to hone in on and then kind of drill down. You want to be prepared. You want to have these beautiful, clear, open-ended questions. Tell me about communication versus communication is really good, right? And trying to just stay away from those leading, closed questions that really don't get you a ton of information. So as much as you want to be prepared and you may love your questions, it's important to not be completely married to them. Because as we know, conversations can turn on a dime, and this is specifically true in focus groups because that's just how conversation and people work. So you really kind of have to be ready for the nature of the conversations to change and to have that natural flow. And be ready to pivot and to jump in and to just go with the flow, which is really hard to do, but also super, super important. It's going to be a skill that you're going to want to look for and deciding who is going to be facilitating these kind of focus groups, as Elizabeth had said. All right. One of the biggest things is that asking hard questions really leads to hearing hard answers. Okay. If you're going to ask a hard question, be ready for someone to give you some information that may not be easy to hear. All right. So be prepared somewhat for the uncomfortable vulnerability, as Elizabeth said, or challenging answers or questions that lead to other questions. Just keeping in mind that however difficult, however hard these things are to hear, this is really what you want, right? Because this is what is essential for the growth. That is, those hard questions will hopefully lead to a deeper understanding and some really effective problem solving down the road. Again, be ready to hear things that might be difficult, might hear something you disagree with, or maybe something that's a complete surprise or a shock. But it's really, really important to try to take this feedback as just information, right? It's not personal necessarily. And you really need to consider the unique experiences of the person sharing, right? Not letting it evolve into a complaint session. This is really difficult. And a skill that the person who is leading the focus group is going to want to be astute at. They have the important role of not letting it evolve into that. We've all been in those, and they're not fun or comfortable for anybody, I don't think. So when that does happen, and there are very valid complaints, so respectfully listening to everyone's opinion, but keeping things moving forward, okay? a lot of times focus groups are a great time for people to get together and share stories. I think this I've seen a lot, particularly in family focus groups. Every family has a story to share. They want to share their journey. And occasionally these can be accompanied by some traumatic experiences. And it's really important, again, for that skilled facilitator, whoever's going to be doing that, to really hear and to add value to that point of view, even if it's not exactly what's being discussed, but then be able to move on. Focus groups, again, are really a time for gathering information. So important, just like in the personal outcome measures interview. It's not a time to fix anything or to offer advice. It's really just taking that information and seeing it as neutral information, not assigning a value to it at all, because it is information. I would say one caveat around this is that you can ask for solutions to the issues brought up. Okay. For instance, if someone says, communication is really bad, it's a weakness, ask what ideas that person might have to make it better. Focusing on the solutions rather than the problems is a really great way to get information, and then also see if people have ideas to fix things. Again, using that appreciative inquiry approach is so important, and always keeping things moving forward. All right, next we're going to talk about how does CQL use focus group information during the accreditation process. For those of you who have been through an accreditation process, it's a really, really busy time. So many focus groups going on. And honestly, it's the gold standard way for us to get great information. It's how we gather evidence around the present, as well as the prevalence of the basic assurances. Okay. Because we're coming in as strangers, often people open up, and they're eager to talk to us about all kinds of stuff. Again, that's why choosing the person who's going to be facilitating these is so important. We see all kinds of different focus groups, but typically people tend to be really excited. They like to be asked their opinions, and they feel really special for being in this group. And they love to see each other and to talk. A lot of times that happens, and we just kind of move forward with that as it happens. So looking at the things that we're talking about, what are the organizational strengths and opportunities in the unique viewpoints of the group? Again, changing these questions around depending on who you're talking to. For people supported, it might look different. For sure. They might not know, anybody might not know like what the word culture means. So being ready to kind of describe that, okay? But really this is what we're looking at. So what are the strengths? What are the opportunities? Again, that appreciative inquiry approach and the unique viewpoints of the group. As Liz pointed out, what a parent thinks is a unique opportunity might be different than people supported, and might be different than a DSP. So everybody has their own unique opinion, and how they all work together is so interesting. Again, you're going to want to change the language to accommodate the group and how they communicate. But talking about organizational culture, communication, always a huge one, but communication strength and opportunities. Training is a big one, and topics that people would like to have more information around. Do people feel valued within the organization? This is a big one. What ways does the organization show you that you're valued? Honestly, inviting people to show up to a focus group is a way that you show people that they're valued as well. And how would you like to see the organization evolve in the future? Again, from keeping it moving on that. From an accreditation standpoint, focus group are hands down the best way for us to get honest information, particularly from people receiving support and services, and they're the most important ones, right? So a lot of times, unfortunately, they've never been asked their opinions in such an important realm, so it tends to be a really, really fun experience. Again, people are really excited to be together a lot, and they have a lot to talk about, often with each other. It becomes a safe ground for sharing stories, sharing challenges, ideas, and reminiscing, all these things, which can kind of sometimes be hard when you have an agenda of things you want to get accomplished. But letting them do that is really important. My favorite memories of focus groups happen in people-supported focus groups where I just get to sit back and they talk amongst each other and problem solve each other's own ideas, and it turns into a peer mentoring kind of situation. And that's really what you want. The same is true with families, DSPs. seeing them together as a unit, that's really where the magic happens, that they're collaborating and really coming up with some great ideas. Occasionally, people talking to each other can be a bit of a distraction. So you may want to connect people in other ways. It's always nice to say, like, hey, share your contact information in the chat. Put your email in there if you want to. Again, nobody has to, but that's a really great way of using that information. Okay. Yeah, so that's just some things that we are talking about. We're really looking at how policies and procedures are go back to the basic assurances and what people know about them. Okay, so really when we use the focus group for accreditation, we're asking the questions around the basic assurances in different ways based on the group we're talking to. Okay, for instance, with rights, we would ask the people supported focus group, what rights are most important to you? How do you learn about your rights? And then for DSPs, we would ask how they support people with advocacy and exercising rights. For families, we would ask what their opinions are on loved ones and how they're supported with their rights. For frontline supervisors, we would ask what training and support they provide DSPs around rights. So while it sounds really redundant, we get a lot of amazing information around all of the basic assurances, and it really shows us what's truly happening at a very visceral level. One thing to point out is that you don't want to, and we are very careful at CQL during the accreditation process to not look at those one-offs, right, or isolated examples of just maybe one person that has had a particularly not great experience, but to really focus on the prevalence, okay, and the theme. So again, CQL at the nitty-gritty is just really looking to see if systems and practices are robust, reliable, and sustainable. All right. And so focus groups are really the best way to see if this is really possible and if it's happening at all levels of the organization in the best way. So then once we get this information, particularly this is from the CQL accreditation standpoint, we connect it back to the validation of the basic assurances and ensure that there's organizational systems and real life practice. So for instance, organizations can have the most amazing policies and procedures written, but if it's not prevalent and understood by people, then it's not necessarily happening in practice. And so that's a really great way of getting that information, okay? All right, so keeping that momentum alive. So once CQL leaves, we've done all these lovely focus groups and gotten a lot of great information. We really recommend that you continue doing those if that's something that your organization is into. But really sustaining that focus group momentum after CQL is gone. So typically, we like to think that it's a really great accreditation week and everybody's really excited about what's happened and feeling good and celebrating. So using that momentum to really just ensure that after CQL is gone, you can keep those focus groups to keep the momentum alive, okay? And so this is a great way to check in. How are we doing with that sustainability feature? Is it still happening? All right. So we recommend this is a great way to carry on after. Okay. All right. So plan a schedule. Who, how, when, where, all those things. We always recommend don't have the people in your focus groups who are going to be the ones who always say great things about your organization, because it's great to have that for sure. But it's also really nice to have some differing opinions as well, or people with different experiences. Okay. Offer options, different days, times. You know, as a person who worked overnights, it's really hard when everything's during the day when you're supposed to be sleeping. So thinking about how to invite those people to the table, right? So that they have their time to share their opinions. Virtual options work great for maximum participation, but it's really hard to do those hybrid groups. And if you've been a part of one of them, you know why. It just can get a little bit mucky. So maybe either all in person or all hybrid. Again, like Liz said, keeping groups on the smaller side and time limited. You know how busy everybody is. And really 1 hour, maybe 1.5 hours at the most is enough time, depending on how many questions are being asked. Again, wanting to be respectful of people's times, okay? Hopefully you can really sell and portray the focus groups as a fun, exciting, productive time, like when CQL accreditation focus groups were happening, ideally. It's always nice when there's like a little buzz about things and people, maybe hear from their coworkers, hey, I did this thing. It was great. They listened to my opinion and they actually listened and did something about it. Like Liz said, it's always nice to combine focus groups with things like food, swag, something new and interesting. But again, focus groups are just a great way to continue the discussion around the basic assurances, talk about progress and new ideas. You always want to be asking people for new ideas, particularly after a CQL visit. You'll want to keep that enthusiasm and positivity high, as well as gratitude, continuing to thank people often for the great work that they've done. And you'll always want to ensure, again, it's a safe space where opinions are shared, again, without that fear of retaliation. Let people know how focus group information is used and possibly tied to some success stories about it. Hey, we heard in a focus group that you want some more benefits. So this is how we're trying to help you get more benefits, is one example. Okay, rabbit holes. You do not want to get sucked in a rabbit hole. It's springtime, and I think in your yard you're probably seeing some of those. You don't want to twist your ankle in it. Same is true with focus groups. Don't get sucked in if there is a conversation that's kind of going differently than you want it to. Don't be afraid to table something and save it for another time. That can look like a one-on-one conversation. It can look like another whole focus group around something. Sometimes you use a parking lot and park things in there. Getting the person's contact information, however, is the quickest and most respectful way to say, hey, I hear what you're saying, and we're keeping things moving. As Liz said before, ensuring confidentiality. This is really, really important. State it at the beginning and really mean it so that people can be transparent and say what they want to say without fear of it coming back to get them later. They need to feel that safe space. Don't record focus groups. Again, none of those AI fireflies in the waiting room, letting them in to record. You really also want to make focus groups accommodating for people who may not communicate the same as the written word and in the typical focus group format. So think about what that might look like for them, whether it be a live transcript, whether it be a staff member or a person helping them. However, they are best accommodated. We've had focus groups with translators before, really making sure that all people have equal opportunity to communicate what's important to them. However, again, it's really important that the people who are supporting others are not actively contributing or judging or trying to talk over the people, because sometimes that does happen. Again, focus groups have so many benefits to an organization. Another avenue or resource that you have is your CQL partner staff, okay? Don't be afraid to reach out to your CQL staff who partnered with you either on your accreditation or any of us to see what would be some great ideas or specific tools for focus groups moving forward. All right, so if you haven't already, please sign up for some CQL emails and resources sent straight to your inbox. It's a wonderful thing to have. We're going to put our contact information on here as well, but make sure that you follow us on our social media accounts. We have the beautiful e-community on Facebook. It's a great way to share resources and connect to our partners. And then please reach out. Elizabeth and I are available, as well as any of the CQL staff if you have any questions or need some support. Again, that's the beauty of the partnership is that we're here for each other. So, all right. Yay. So now I'm going to throw it over to Seth to see if we have some questions in that Q&A box.
We do. Great presentation so far. And yeah, we did get some questions in. First one comes from an attendee, Scott. Scott asks, do you have any suggestions for how to redirect the focus group if it turns into a complaint session?
Why, yes, we do. A couple different things to think about with this. So number one, always try to be proactive. Keep an eye out for when you think it could go that route. That's one of those traits of a really effective facilitator or moderator, if you will. So keep an eye out if you think it could go that route, depending on the questions you're asking, what you're starting to hear, who's, invited, that sort of thing. Also, listen, but don't let it go on longer than maybe a minute or two, because it could snowball really quickly, and usually does snowball really quickly. So typically what we'll do is we'll politely state that, this is great info. We appreciate your feedback. And there's a lot that we want to discuss. So let's keep it moving along, and then offer to meet them afterwards. So you can say, I would love to chat more about this. Let's talk afterwards. I just have some more questions that I want to get out there, and I want to learn from the group, but I definitely want to hear more from you. So don't dismiss maybe some of the things that are coming up from people, but maybe also just, gently guiding them to meet after the group, so that you can continue on with the full group. And sometimes you may have to do that a couple different times. But I think most importantly is getting in there very quickly and not letting it snowball, is really important. So, Kristen, I don't know if you have anything to add or.
That was a great answer. I mean, again, Scott, you definitely want to be respectful of the person's opinion, as I'm sure you would be anyway. So letting them have their moments, but just making sure that it's kind of, minimized time-wise and distraction-wise to really focus on those things. So.
Minimizing distractions for sure. So, yeah. Anything else,
Good
Seth?
question, good responses.
Yeah,
we do. We had one come in from an attendee. As a smaller organization, we only support a few people with a couple employees. How can we apply these concepts to our agency?
That's a great question. We see that too at CQL when we visit with small organizations. We can't do a focus group. There's only maybe a couple employees, only a couple people receiving services. So what you might do as an organization is, this is really about that feedback loop, right? So focus groups, are good when you have multiple people you can bring together and they also collaborate with each other. If you don't have that, it's really just about those regular check-ins with the people you support and staff, asking very specific questions each time. So, every quarter, meeting with each staff, not just to see how they're doing performance-wise, what's going on, but also asking some very pointed questions, just to get that feedback. And I would definitely make sure that they're pointed questions, to get feedback, because if you just kind of leave it open, usually people say, oh, all is good. So, with families, it's the same thing. If you are supporting just a couple of people and their families are involved, checking in with families the same way every quarter, maybe every 6 months, asking them a few very specific questions, is very helpful. So you're not holding formal focus groups, but you're still gathering the same type of information from them. And with community partners, you can still consider inviting community partners in, to obtain feedback. So you can do that through maybe having a lunch for community partners, sending maybe them a survey for feedback, but you can still get that feedback from them by doing maybe small little groups. I've seen some organizations, once a year have, just a small lunch where they bring in, kind of those stakeholders, community members and partner, and get to learn a few things from them, kind of like a lunch and learn, but they're getting feedback from their community partners. So, good question.
Yeah, I would just add to, sometimes when we see people often, we don't think we need to ask them the questions, like, oh, I know they would bring up if there was a problem, or I see them every day. But again, just not assuming and asking the questions is really important, despite the size of your organization.
Yeah. And going along with that, Kristen, that's a very good point. We can't make the assumption, like you said, Kristen, that somebody would tell us if something was not right, because we might think that, but it doesn't mean that they will. Sometimes you have to ask the very specific question, to, get them to think, and then to give you the answer. It's kind of what, our focus groups do, and it's what the POM does a lot of times. It asks those very specific questions that people have never been asked before. So good point, Kristen.
Question.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, we had another question come in from Courtney, an attendee. Do you have a suggestion on who, and you may have covered this a little bit, but maybe elaborate on it a little bit. Do you have a suggestion on who to invite? When we hold our focus groups, we invite family members and people supported, and it gets a little chaotic. I do love the togetherness, but I'm also wondering if we need to split up the audience.
I would say definitely split up the audience. Sometimes too, especially people that you support, maybe aren't going to um, fully give you as much as they would if their families weren't involved. So from what we have learned, I would definitely say split those groups up. Talk to families separately, get their unique perspective. Talk to people that you support separately to get their unique perspective. You might find this easier doing them at the same time, but with two different moderators in two different locations. Sometimes if families are coming with people receiving services, in order to get maximum participation, you can hold both groups, but do them separately. You're asking similar questions, you're getting their unique perspectives, and maybe it won't be as chaotic, hopefully.
Yeah, for sure. Great question.
Yeah.
And this next question kind of builds off of the first one that we had from Scott. And it's, do you have any guidance for improving involvement from the whole group when one person or a few people are kind of taking over the focus group?
Whoa.
Yeah, we see that every now and then. Setting the expectations from the beginning, of course, we want to do. Every now and then throughout the group, you may have to put out reminders that, you'd love to hear from everyone. Sometimes the very talkative person kind of gets that cue. Sometimes they don't. You might say to one person, the really talkative person, that's great feedback. Kristen, what are your thoughts? If Seth is being very talkative, very chatty, kind of taking over, you might say, that's great, Seth. I love to hear that. Kristen, what are your thoughts? Or what's your experience? I'd love to know what you're thinking. And then you may have to actually move from to a couple different people just to make sure it's very pointedly, I want to know your opinion, and then go from there. So.
Yeah, that's a great point. And don't be above calling people out and asking them. It might not be the most comfortable thing, but definitely, there's power in giving your voice, and you're giving those people power by asking them, hey, tell me about your experience, and making sure that everybody's voice truly is heard. Not the easiest thing. So again, great follow-up question with that, and it's bound to happen. But the beauty of focus groups is, again, that everybody's voice gets heard equally.
Absolutely.
Sure. And then we had a question from an attendee. Could you share some examples of how organizations can effectively communicate findings from focus groups, like with other staff, people supported, families, and others?
Well, I think number one, absolutely be prepared to share the information. Don't just take the information and do nothing with it. That is probably the worst thing that anybody could do. So think about how you already communicate within your organization. Are you using emails, newsletters, your website? Do you use, say, the communication system in your electronic health record system? Whatever it might be, and it might need to be done in multiple ways, is making sure that you are taking your aggregate information, those findings, if you will, and putting it out there through one or multiple systems, and then including the follow-up. So don't just put out the information and say, this is what we learned. Put out the information, say, this is what we learned. This is why these groups were held. And based on what you said to us, this is now the steps that we are taking. And here's where we're at in doing that. Or, we heard some other great things that we're still working on. It's just going to take a bit longer. So the most important thing is just get it out there, but make sure it's not just the information. It's also, here's how we're trying to close that loop. And you might have to do it in multiple ways. Yeah. And timely. Cannot say that enough. Timely.
Great point. Great point.
Is it a year later and we've already forgotten about the focus groups? Or are we doing this as responsively and timely as possible? Yep.
That's excellent. Well, I hate to say it, but we're hitting the top of the hour, and we want to be respectful of everyone's time today. As As Elizabeth and Kristen both mentioned, of course, you can follow up with either one of them after this webinar. Their contact information is up on your screen right now. They'd be happy to answer any other questions you may have, but we do want to thank you all for taking an hour out of your day and joining us. Thank you to Elizabeth and Kristen for the great presentation, and we hope to see you all on future accreditation webinars.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.